The young and the restless spoilers. The tension in Genoa City had reached a fever pitch, and for Lily, the weight of her indecision had finally given way to a choice that shocked the core of those around her. Her heart had long been torn between past and present, between loyalty and liberation, between pain and desire. But in the end, she did what no one expected. She leaned into her longing for Damian, not just with words, but with action. It was not a decision born of clarity or deep reflection. No, it was fueled by something darker, sharper, a twisted form of vengeance against the man who once held her heart and had shattered it far too many times, Cain. When Lily kissed Damian, it wasn't just about passion or comfort, it was a performance delivered with venom and precision, meant to send a message that Cain would never misunderstand. Her lips on Damian's were not merely a declaration of new love. They were a knife twisted into old wounds. She didn't stop at the kiss, they walked, hand in hand, eyes burning with defiance, straight into the front doors of the Grand Phoenix Hotel. And she made sure Cain saw every step. Cain had not come to that moment expecting to break. But what he witnessed ignited something in him that he hadn't felt in years, not just jealousy, but humiliation, raw and public. As he stood frozen outside the hotel, staring at the glass doors that closed behind Lily and Damian, he felt the oxygen leave his body. For a man who prided himself on control, on manipulation, on always staying one move ahead, this was a failure he hadn't anticipated. Without a word, he turned and stormed into the first bar he could find, his gait uneven, his breath uneven. The bartender barely looked up as Cain slammed a fist on the polished counter and demanded the strongest liquor available. When the glass was placed before him, Cain didn't hesitate. He lifted it, stared at the amber liquid as if it held all the answers he couldn't find, and then swallowed it in one brutal gulp. But alcohol wasn't going to dull the storm inside him. It wasn't just that he had lost Lily, it was that she had chosen him. Damian. Of all people. Cain's mind spun violently with images of Lily's betrayal, her hands on Damian's chest, the way she tilted her head to whisper into his ear, the wicked gleam in her eyes as she watched Cain watching. Was she testing him? Punishing him? Or was she truly moving on? The uncertainty made it worse. Each drink he downed became a question unanswered, a memory poisoned, a scar reopened. He wasn't just angry, he was wounded in a way that made him dangerous. Because Cain didn't just suffer in silence. He plotted in shadows. And yet, while Cain unraveled, Damian sensed the tremors beneath his own feet. He was not naive. He knew better than to believe that Lily's sudden affection came without cost. Even as he held her, even as they lay entangled in the sheets of their hotel room, part of his mind remained vigilant. The other shoe was going to drop. Cain was not a man who lost quietly. Damian didn't need enemies to tell him that. The air in Genoa City was already thick with the sense that something was coming. And it came, swiftly and without warning. The photograph was slipped under his door, inside a plain white envelope. There was no return address, no note, no blood. Just a single glossy image that made Damian's blood freeze in his veins. It was a photo of Amy, his mother, bound and gagged in a room he didn't recognize. Her eyes, filled with fear and confusion, stared directly into the lens as if silently pleading with him to find her, to save her. Damian's hands trembled as he held the image, his mind racing through every possible scenario. Who had taken her? Why now? How had they even found her? He hadn't seen Amy in over a year, she had been living quietly, far away from the chaos of his life. And now, someone had reached across that distance and used her as a pawn. He wanted to believe it wasn't Cain. He needed to believe it wasn't Cain. Because if it was, then the man was capable of a cruelty that went beyond rivalry. But as Damian tried to make sense of it, his phone buzzed with a message that offered no comfort. No name. No threats. Just one instruction, leave Genoa City. Or you'll lose more than her. Damian dropped the phone as if it burned. The message was clear, chilling in its brevity. Someone wanted him gone, and they were willing to hurt innocents to ensure it. There was no question in his heart, this was Cain's doing. Who else had motive? Who else had the resources? Who else hated him enough to drag Amy into this war? Back at the bar, Cain sat alone, surrounded by silence, the empty glass in front of him a mirror to the hollowness inside. He had received a message too, though no one knew it. A text, anonymous but unignorable, "She belongs to me. You crossed a line. Now suffer." At first, he laughed it off, a prank, a scare tactic. But the laughter didn't last. Deep down, Cain knew. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. The game had changed, and he wasn't the only one pulling strings. But even as the world began to turn against him, Cain refused to break the mask. When confronted, when asked point-blank if he had anything to do with Amy's disappearance, he denied it with the cold confidence of a man who had rehearsed every lie 1,000 times. His voice didn't crack. His eyes didn't flinch. But the truth was another matter. Because Cain had considered it. He hadn't ordered it, not directly. But he had whispered the right things to the right people. Dropped suggestions. Inferred threats. Created a space where someone else could act on his behalf and shield him from responsibility. It was the perfect crime, born of jealousy, buried in plausible deniability. And now it had spiraled beyond even his control. For when he saw Damian again, accusing eyes filled with fury and fear, Cain didn't argue. He didn't lash out. He wept. The tears came without warning, hot and bitter, born of shame and despair. Not just because he'd lost Lily. Not just because he may have destroyed an innocent woman's life. But because in that moment, he realized that whatever game he had been playing, he had lost. And in losing, he had become something he once despised. A man who used others as weapons, who masked weakness in power, who confused love with ownership. The villain in his own story. Yet in Genoa City, nothing stays buried for long. Lily would soon discover the photo. Chelsea would question why Cain was drinking alone, face pale and trembling. Amanda would see through the tears and find the shadow underneath. And Amy, if she were still alive, would become the center of a war no one could escape. Because this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about revenge, about guilt, about two men locked in a spiral that could only end in ruin. And for Lily, standing between them, the choice she thought she made for herself may turn out to be a trap she'll never escape. Because when the past refuses to die, the present becomes its battlefield. And Genoa City, once again, would bleed because of it. In a darkened room lit only by the flickering bulb of a single exposed light, Amy sat bound to a chair, her wrists chafed and bruised from the tight cords that held her in place. The cold air bit into her skin, but it was not the chill that made her tremble. It was the sudden, jarring realization that her life had been reduced to a pawn in a war she did not even understand. She had been taken with no warning, no explanation, snatched from her quiet, solitary life and thrust into a nightmare. And yet, beneath the shock and fear, there was no confusion in her heart about why this was happening. It wasn't about her. It was about her son. Someone was using her to hurt Damian. The hatred that had brought her here wasn't hers to carry, it belonged to the man who had orchestrated this cruelty, and Amy knew, with the intuitive clarity of a mother's love, that the reason she was here was because someone wanted to destroy the man she had raised. Her voice cracked as she screamed for help, calling out into the silence, praying someone would hear. But there were no echoes, no answers, only the dull throb of desperation pressing in around her. She pulled against the ropes again, even as they bit deeper into her skin. Her breathing was ragged, not just from panic but from pain, the kind that had lived in her chest for months now. Because Amy was dying. She had known for some time. The cancer had spread further than any of the doctors had predicted. Her strength had waned, her body slowly betraying her. And yet, even in this room of terror and uncertainty, she did not fear death. What she feared what made her scream louder, cry harder, was the thought of Damian suffering because of her. Of watching her son break under the weight of guilt and helplessness. That, more than death, was the nightmare she could not bear. Damian, meanwhile, was unraveling. The envelope with the photo lay open on the table before him, and the cryptic message echoed in his head with a relentless rhythm: leave Genoa City. Or you'll lose more than her. He stared blankly at his phone, as if willing it to ring, to give him instructions, a voice, something. But it stayed still, mocking him with silence. And then the reality sank in, heavier than any loss he had ever felt. His mother, his fierce, resilient, quietly powerful mother, was in danger because of him. Because of choices he made, battles he entered, love he pursued. Lily's face flashed through his mind, the softness in her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she had made him feel alive again. But as his vision blurred with tears, another image overtook it, his mother, gagged, terrified, powerless. And in that moment, he knew. He couldn't have both. The anguish poured from him like a flood as he doubled over in grief, sobbing into his hands. The pain was raw, primal, hollowing him out from the inside. He didn't want to lose Lily, not now, not when they had just begun. But there was no negotiation, no compromise. The kidnapper had made it clear, leave or lose her. And as much as he loved Lily, as deeply as he had begun to see a future in her arms, she could never fill the void his mother's death would leave behind. Damian had lived through betrayals, through exile, through heartbreak. But nothing had ever forced him to weigh love against blood, desire against duty. Until now. He rose from the chair slowly, knees trembling, heart pounding as he stared at the photo one more time. His decision had already been made, not because he was brave, but because he was her son. And no man who truly loved his mother could let her die for his pride. As he reached for his coat, he whispered her name. Amy. Not as a plea, not as a cry for help, but as a promise. He would leave Genoa City. He would disappear if he had to. He would walk away from Lily, from everything he had built, because he had no other choice. Love, after all, could fade. Hearts could break and heal again. But a mother was forever. And when the end finally came for Amy, as it soon would, he needed to know that she didn't die because he was too proud to let go. Outside, the night had deepened. The lights of the city flickered in careless indifference as Damian stepped into the cold, one foot already leaving behind the life he had tried to create. In another part of town, Cain stood in front of a mirror, still wiping the remnants of tears from his face, refusing to admit to himself just how much damage he had caused. And somewhere, hidden behind locked doors and surveillance feeds, Amy remained the ghost in the center of a war she never asked for. Strong, unyielding, and praying that her son would make the only choice she would ever forgive him for. To save her life, even if it meant breaking his own heart.